While we talk a lot about views and value systems on this channel, many of the new viewers often lack a bit of background that I often presuppose due to older videos and other content that I provide here, like the book and the Dhamma Hub and Discord server and everything. And this also includes the general role of views in Buddhism and the fact that especially the oldest part of the Pali Canon suggests that all views must be transcended and overcome, or abandoned, for the breakthrough to the Dhamma. And today we try to analyze what views are, why sensuality overall is technically a view, and also how views can be changed. And the first and most interesting part is that the vast majority of people, I would say, think of views as something intellectual, along the lines of having an opinion or having thoughts in your mind regarding a certain topic. Something that you consider to be true or something like that. And they are kinda only there when you think about them, which is one of the properties that people generally think of as views, or views have that property. They kinda only really exist, well, when they're there, when they express themselves through their words, through their deeds, through your thinking, essentially. And you can have lots of views about politics, the climate, wars on the planet, social issues, and many other things. You could, for example, think about all the things that the Buddha defined as wrong speech, like talk at the well, talk about kings, talk about other things. All those things have views connected to them, I would say. And this is rather interesting. And in essence, views are not really something that is intellectual on that level. And there are lots of examples from the suttas that you can think of. For example, the Buddha lists in the Digha Nikaya, I think, 62 wrong views overall. And the chief, or the two chiefs among them, are certain annihilationist views and certain externalist views. As in either after death we're just gone, and then the soul or the essence of us lives on forever, or something along those lines. And then there are lots of sensual views that are also mentioned in the suttas, as in that we generally regard sensual engagement to be pleasant. This is one of the root views, I would say. And there are lots of exemplifications of that. For example, some of us like chocolate, some of us like playing video games. Certain people prefer one of the sensory inputs over certain others. Some people are more touch-based, some are more smell-based, some are more taste-based. Most people are visual creatures, but some are not. But in essence, sensual views just mean that we view certain things to be pleasant. And overall, basically all people, unless they are holy men, pretty much, or saints, by the standards of other religions, tend to regard sensuality as pleasant, as an escape from suffering. And this is a view, something that happens on the level of gut feeling, something that is intuitive to us. We don't have to think about it. A view is also there when we do not think about it. And then in the suttas, it is also mentioned that there is the self-view. The self-view is probably the most fundamental view that there is when it comes to the wrong views. It is a chief wrong view that you have to overcome when you want to achieve a breakthrough to the Dhamma. It is a view of externalness, a view of sameness, a view of control. Those are all things that you do not have on an intellectual level, but it is a way of living. Those views manifest through your actions, through your speech, through all those things in your everyday life. And then we have lots of wrong views that the Buddha mentioned, but he usually just used it as a category, as an umbrella term for lots of things, because there are infinitely many examples of what a wrong view is. Because everything, essentially, that leads you away from liberation, leads you away from the Dhamma, is a wrong view, even if it produces lots of good results when it comes to the mundane and worldly level. Even if you think that, I don't know, being nice to animals or being a vegan is essential or something like that, that might even be quite good on the worldly level, but when it comes to Dhamma practice, holding on to such a view is quite unwholesome. Simply because it leads you away from liberation, because it leads to you putting lots of your attention towards those things, because your actions are typically in line with your views. And then we have, in the suttas mentioned, the mundane right view, or the worldly right view. And I think I recently did a talk with Saif on that topic. But essentially, this view encompasses all those things that lead to behavior that is in line with the Dhamma, that essentially brings you to a state of samadhi, that brings you to a heavenly rebirth, which is pretty much a precondition for the vast majority of people who need lots of samadhi for a breakthrough to the Dhamma. Some people don't, but most people need. And then in the end, we have the right view, which is probably the most talked about view. And again, this is not something intellectual. This is not something that you can just manifest through reading the suttas or something like that. It is an extension of your conduct. So when you change the way you live for a very long time, and your heart, your chitta, really realizes that this new way of life is better, then you can make a breakthrough to the Dhamma and attain the normal right view, so to speak, or the world transcending right view. And in essence, when it comes to wrong views, the suttas and the Buddha are very clear about their position and about their unwholesomeness. And for example, in Anguttara Nikaya, number 1.306, the Buddha said, "Monks, I do not see a single thing that gives rise to unwholesome qualities like wrong view. Also, I do not see a single thing, when unwholesome qualities have arisen, makes them increase and grow like wrong view. When you have wrong view, unwholesome qualities arise, and once arisen, they grow." This is something that the Buddha was very vocal about. And he even said that there is not a single other thing. As in, you could even cheat, take drugs, you could lie, you could kill, and all those things would be less unwholesome than holding wrong view. And this is a rather drastic statement, I would say. And most people do not really grasp the intensity of it. And the Buddha further continues, "Monks, when an individual has wrong views, whatever bodily, verbal, or mental deeds they undertake in line with that view, their intentions, their wishes and choices all lead to what is unlikable, undesirable, disagreeable, harmful, and suffering. Why is that? Because their view is bad. Suppose a seed of neem, angled gourd, or bitter gourd was planted in moist earth. Whatever nutrients it takes up from the earth and water would lead to its bitter, acerbic, and unpleasant taste. Why is that? Because the seed is bad. In the same way, when an individual has wrong views, whatever bodily, verbal, or mental deeds they undertake in line with that view, their intentions, aims, wishes, and choices all lead to what is unlikable, undesirable, disagreeable, harmful, and suffering. Why is that? Because their view is bad." And this is from Anguttara Nikaya number 1.314. As you can see, wrong views are pretty much at the top of the food chain. They color everything. They are pretty much the basis for the entirety of your suffering. So when your view is bad, whatever actions you undertake that is in line with that view, and generally pretty much all our actions are colored by our views to some extent or another, will be bad, will lead to suffering. That does not mean that you will immediately suffer, but their overarching aim, their overarching goal will be suffering. You converge upon suffering. And you can compare views, and I like to do that, with, well, different colored sunglasses, so to speak. You can put on glasses and they have a certain color. And when you hold a view, the entirety of your experience will be changed or filtered according to the sunglasses that you put on. So as long as you hold certain views, your perception or your experience will be altered, will be modified. And views are kinda, even though I do not like that word very much, pre-conscious or conscious or pre-attentive, or they are feeling-based, so to speak. And a good example is just that chocolate is good, or something like along those lines. This is not really intellectual. It's not only that that view exists while you are in front of chocolate or something, or while you desire chocolate. It is clearly there all the time in the background. You hold it as a view. You hold chocolate dear to you. And no one has to tell you or remind you that chocolate is good. This is more or less a default for you. So whenever you encounter chocolate, you know on the level of gut feeling, on the level of your heart, that you deem it as good. And the same is true for sleep, for food, for sexuality, for shows, for small talk. Or in short, we regard sensuality as good. We regard it as an escape from suffering. And this view or this fuel has to be overcome for the Dhamma to find footing in your experience. Because for as long as you deem sensuality is good, you are not ready to try out any alternative. You need to first see, okay, there's a serious problem with this kind of view that I have, so that there is room for an alternative. And even if there is room for an alternative, it does not mean that the Dhamma will find footing. It is just a possibility, and that is very important to keep in mind. And whatever arises in your experience is usually tainted by our craving sunglasses and by our essential views. The very things that we perceive are only those things that we are interested in according to our views. Everything else is kind of ignored by us. And we do not even know that we wear or have those views or have those sunglasses on. We do not even know that the entirety of our perception is colored in that way. Yet we have to escape something that we do not even know is there, that we cannot see. So we kind of have to go by faith. So we must first undo all those wrong views and end up with the right view. So what we have to do is take off all those, let's say, wrongly colored sunglasses, so that in the end, only the right view, the rightly colored sunglasses remain. And we kind of have to start with the mundane right view. We first have to attain that. Otherwise, we will not even start making the right effort in the direction that the Buddha named. Because in the end, he prescribed a training. A view is changed through training and not through some intellectual exercise. That in itself, that a view can be changed by intellectual thinking and pondering or something like that, that is a view, and it is a wrong one, because it would hinder your effort in the right direction. And this is all what the right view is about. And you can essentially try to place views in the chain of dependent origination. And in the end, you can think about it. At the very top of the chain, there is avijja, and at the bottom of the chain, there is suffering. And you can place all the wrong views that we hold at the very root of this chain. It is not that the wrong views are avijja, but they are examples of avijja. So they are one or another way in which avijja manifests, in which you distract yourself from the Dhamma, in which you distract yourself from the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are the right view, essentially. So everything you experience in this chain is colored by those views. Everything. The entirety of your experience as it unfolds. And when you make the right effort and practice rightly for a long time, right view will replace wrong view, and avijja will be replaced by vijja, by knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. And this kind of breaks the chain of dependent origination. But first, you have to remove the worst views that fuel your wrong conduct, because your wrong conduct in turn fuels avijja. It's an active act of looking away. We distract ourselves from the Dhamma through our actions. And this is very important to keep in mind. And the Buddha said the following in the suttas. And what bhikkhus is right view that is affected by the taints, partaking of merit, ripening in the acquisitions. There is what is given and what is offered, and what is sacrificed. There is fruit and result of good and bad actions. There is this world and the other world. There is mother and father. There are beings who are reborn spontaneously. There are in the world good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins who have realized for themselves by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. This is right view affected by taints, partaking of merit and ripening in acquisitions. So what the Buddha essentially says here, there is a worldly kind of right view. There is a right view that leads you to heaven. If you take on all those views here, first by faith and later by experience, then you have a very good chance to be reborn in a heavenly realm, as the Buddha said. And it essentially is the recognition that craving is bad, and that you are at least partially responsible for it. That there is a certain ground state of your experience that requires responsibility. You acknowledge that your deeds matter, the good ones and the bad ones. So essentially, this view contains everything that you need to understand and change your conduct so that you will essentially end up in a state of samadhi where the surface level suffering at least is gone. And you understand the framework of good and bad karma and what role or part of craving you play in the process. And the view contains literally everything you need for samadhi. Yet, and this is very important, you do not understand the root of craving. That is something that only the real right view on dependent origination can do. The root of craving is what leads to the regrowth of craving in the future. This is what a root does. If you leave a root in the ground when you weed your garden or something like that, then the weeds will regrow, sometimes for a very, very long time. And if you remove those roots, then you have a very good chance that you will get rid of the weeds. And this is what we try to do. And how do we undo a wrong view? Well, first, we have to frequently challenge ourselves, and initially at least, we have to go by faith. Because when someone tells us that there is something better than sensuality, as an example, then we do not know that by heart yet. And if you, for example, try to convince someone of trying to lose weight, well, who is, for example, convinced that it's all genetics or something, then those people first have to go by faith in you. You have to start with faith, because only experience will show you that the new view that the other person has proposed is actually better and that it is working. And this experience is what, or this experiential realization is what transforms your view. And the same is true for sensuality. By transcending it through practice, through patience, through effort for a very long time, you understand sensuality as painful. And then, in hindsight, so to speak, once you are free from sensuality, your view is transformed. Because now you notice, oh, this really is much better. And this is how you transform your view, through practice, through patience. And the same does apply to self-view and dependent origination. You have to really see for yourself that it only is suffering. That there's nothing that fades but suffering once you let go of that view. And in essence, views are not understood or changed intellectually at all. Sure, there is an intellectual component that can guide you along. But this intellectual component is only really an enabler for the right kind of practice. The view, in the end, is changed and transformed experientially through a realization that it is actually working. It convinces your heart, so to speak. It is changed through training and experience of the fruit of this kind of training. And you start the entire process, obviously, at the branch level views. And then you work your way up to more and more fundamental and root level views. So in the beginning, you have to remove all those tiny small views that are unwholesome in your day-to-day life. And the more you remove those, the more you remove the undergrowth and foliage, the closer you can actually come to the root views that lead to the renewal of suffering, to the rebirth of suffering, to the rebirth of craving. And at some point, the true roots of suffering are in plain sight, and then you can actually change them. But anyway, let us now come to the most important parts. First of all, views are at the very root of all suffering. As long as you hold a wrong view, suffering will be the destination of all your actions, because your actions will be in line with your views and values. And wrong view, as the Buddha said, is literally the most unwholesome thing in the entire world. It is more unwholesome than killing, more unwholesome than cheating, more unwholesome than everything. Because on the level of samsara, wrong views will lead you to eons upon eons on end of suffering and all the other things where you likely kill and cheat and whatnot. And views essentially color the entirety of your experience. They change everything. Everything is affected by your views. And thus views must be undone, and they must be undone experientially and not intellectually if you want to arrive at the right view. And intellect can be a vehicle to undoing your wrong views. It can be a good fuel, so to speak, to do the right things. But in essence, the intellectual part is not what gets the work done. And in summary, the right view is the most important thing on the entire path. Because the right view targets exactly the roots of craving. Not just craving, but the roots of it, so that it cannot arise in the future. But anyway, this should be enough for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.